Thanks for being here. Subscribe to Cheating Stories Best, so you don't miss new stories.
Gait, style of dress, behavior. Does everything change that much when there is an outsider in the relationship? Today's story will answer that question. Enjoy watching it. It was a shocking moment for everyone who knew us as a couple to hear the words of Adura, my wife of over 16 years. She said them in front of our family and friends, who had thrown her a surprise party to celebrate her achievements. The incredulous looks I received suggested that most of those present were wondering how I would react to what Adura was saying. This wasn't surprising to me, as I had recently learned that she had made many changes in her life without including me, and I knew it was only a matter of time and place before we publicly announced the end of our marriage. Even though I hadn't seen her in person in over 6 months, Adura looked good. After I missed her birthday due to quarantine measures, it was clear she had lost 20 pounds. I wondered if this was the result of some high-end diet or other measures. At 36 years old, Adura still had a slender figure and a height of 5 feet 8 inches, which made many men turn their heads. Her new hairstyle highlighted her face, giving her a more sophisticated look. An added bonus was that she wore 2-inch heels, which toned her lower body, making her look even slimmer. Between the two physical changes, she looked younger and more vibrant than before her last trip abroad, where she lost the weight. Her figure only better accentuated her natural curves, and everyone was impressed by her appearance. The expensive and classy Parisian-style outfit was too chic for the venue, but it highlighted her new sensibility with brilliance and elegance. This was Adura, whom we were not used to seeing. Everyone knew she had made it clear there had been changes in her life that we were unaware of. Her image projected that she was now an attractive woman back on the market, ready to meet new people, even while married. She seemed to be telling the world she had found a new sense of freedom from social norms, and I just had to suck it up and accept it. She was demonstrating that she was ready for new intimate adventures with the right person. Some suggested that we had an open marriage. From others, I caught looks full of sadness or contempt. If she wanted to publicly humiliate me, she succeeded perfectly. Tara, her longtime best friend and soon-to-be enemy, walked up to me. It was obvious to most of those present that my wife and I had not spoken since her arrival. Every time I approached her, she would deliberately turn away and walk off. Even the guests, noticing this public display, stayed away from me. I became an untouchable person that no one wanted to talk to. In her style, she sent a message to everyone, and they got it. However, Tara came up to me with her daughter and naturally hugged me. "Who is this woman we see, Ree?" Tara asked with a knowing smile, making sure those nearby could hear her. "This is a newly minted icon in the world of travelers who has no idea what is happening here," I replied. Adura seems to be in complete control of the situation, but in reality, she doesn't understand anything. "I have to thank you for that," Tara said quietly. Now that we see the full picture, we understand how she used her methods to play her games. I'll be happy to give her her final reward. We have a lot of catching up to do. "I thought you'd be happy about what's going to happen," I said. "I'm definitely glad, Tara, I promise. I'll be there when the time is right." The appearance that I'm not in the know should last for a while. I want it to remain a complete surprise. By the end of the evening, everyone will know I'm not the helpless husband she takes me for. Just remember that I'll be busy for the next few days dealing with the fallout from today's events. "I think you just want it to be over, which explains why you look like you're trying to figure everything out," Tara said. "If we had known before what we know now, everything would have been different." Tara was right in many ways. The problem is that sometimes you have to wait to gain knowledge. Tonight, one way or another, the relationship between Adura, Tara, and me will change forever. "Ree," I told Tina during a long conversation before we arrived to you were and why things are the way they are, Tara said with a smile. "I've arranged everything so that you will sit together for dinner. With what happens, we will be freed from the shackles of the past." I had caught glimpses of Tina over the years whenever we got together. Looking at her again, I couldn't help but be proud. Tina was an amazingly beautiful girl, just like her mother. We started talking about what she wanted to do after school, and I found out that she was going to study engineering and design, which excited me. During dinner, Tina tactfully asked the questions I expected her to ask. By the end of dinner, we both realized that we were acceptable to each other in a changing relationship. She had grown up as an only child and would soon have a whole family. When things calmed down after tonight, I couldn't help but wonder how my 3 children would react to the news that they had a sister they didn't know about. It's funny how this truth wouldn't have come to light if Adura hadn't done what she did. I was surprised when her father reported that Adura, his pride and joy, had finally been released by Australian government officials after a 6-month quarantine. Once she landed in New York, she had to be tested again and quarantined for 2 weeks until she was given a clean bill of health. The state and city couldn't get their act together, making the process more difficult. This Friday afternoon, she took a small private jet for the final flight to our regional airport. Jessie, her right hand, flew with her. They've worked together for most of the last 4 years. They arrived just in time for the formal dinner and dance. We both had busy careers, and no one knew what was going on behind closed doors, and we wanted to keep it that way. 4 years ago, our world changed dramatically. Her father, who had become a board member, turned over day-to-day management of the company to his eldest daughter, my wife. In his opinion, the results were excellent. Under her leadership, the company prospered. The conglomerate hadn't posted such good financial results in years, and since she took the reins, the growth had been staggering. Their main competitor was hit hard by the new program she introduced. Our 3 children, with the help of my wife's parents, rented a medium-sized conference room at our favorite club, of which we were all members. They hired the club's catering staff to prepare and serve dinner. A bar was also opened, and all expenses were written off as business expenses. Since there were no restrictions in the region due to the virus, everyone invited came. We had about 50 to 60 people besides family, all the elite of the business world, who came for a private event. It was a celebration that combined a homecoming party, a belated birthday celebration, and a celebration of the conglomerate's success. A private limousine brought Adura and Jessie straight to the venue as soon as they left the airport after her final flight home. We rented it for the evening, so I knew her luggage would be available to her when she left the event. When they approached me with this idea, I immediately agreed, but no one understood why. The fact that I agreed without any persuasion puzzled them because it went against everything I had ever done. After all, everyone knew that I was the family member who didn't like big events and often refused to attend most of them because I never felt like I belonged. Over the past 10 years, everyone could count the events I'd attended on one hand. My problems in this regard stemmed from insecurities that I carried with me since childhood. Those who knew about my life path saw how they influenced everything. As a result, even to this day, I did not feel comfortable around people with power, influence, and money. And yet, I walked among the elite of society, communicating with them as if I belonged. Most of them thought that I had married above my class, and Adura had married below hers. Our neighbors, Jessie and Janice Yellen, attended the event. Both of them came from families with old money and carefully guarded their image. Like anyone with old money, they behaved in a way that showed their power and influence, but only used it when necessary. Everything they did in public was done with grace and class. My oldest daughter, Debbie, was going to be a rock star because she could convince most people to do anything with her personality. I asked her to do what I thought was impossible. She was the one who convinced Janice to come, even though she knew Jessie would be there. From the moment Janice arrived in a sleeveless, tight white dress, she captured my attention. Ever since we first met, I had been naturally drawn to her. Knowing their personal situation, seeing Jessie and Janice together, one could believe that a miracle had happened. They were a couple 10 years younger than my wife and me, and we thought they were both still finding their place in the world. Each of them, in their own way, sought guidance and support from those they interacted with closely or looked up to. Unfortunately, they would soon find out how different this leadership was. Janice was an attractive woman, but when we first met, she lacked confidence. However, being our neighbor apparently affected her so much that every time you saw her, you could tell she was becoming more self-assured. She had a personality that was simply attractive. As a result, we became close friends. Jessie, due to his lack of life experience, became stuck in a relationship with an older woman who manipulated him into providing personal favors that would make 50 Shades of Grey seem innocent. I think Jessie thought this woman loved him, but he found out he was wrong. I prayed that from tonight he would begin to realize what was happening before it was too late for him to save himself. The woman he had been servicing for the past 4 years had developed a greater penchant for perversion. Her night awakening came about thanks to the global lifestyle she was forced to adapt to due to her latest position in her family's international company. Everyone was surprised to see them together, as they knew that Jesse and Janice were going through a legal separation that increasingly looked like a full divorce. But as a couple, it was nice to see that they could communicate with each other peacefully. Janice had been in a terrible state for several weeks after Jesse left their marriage, as it was a surprise to her. With her spouse's absence so frequent, our friendship grew so strong that Adura's children and mine began calling her aunt because of the respect they had for her. It was not unusual for Janice to help my daughters with women's affairs, given that their mother was rarely around. She often cried on my shoulder. In my mind, I loved her and felt the need to protect her. It was while holding her hand that Janice revealed to me that Jesse had always considered himself bisexual. I knew Jesse's biggest problem was that he couldn't live with the guilt and shame he felt when returning home to his wife. Because of the new role he had been thrust into, he needed to step away from his lover's demands and understand what he had gotten himself into. Most men can't satisfy the needs of one woman, but he was balancing between two. Something had to break, and when it did, Janice got hurt. Now I realized that Jesse didn't know how to treat women. Jesse's mistress, an older and experienced woman, knew exactly how to control him like a well-tuned violin. For Jesse's mistress, her new position and intimate interests gave her something she didn't fully understand: power and control. I wondered if she kept his manhood under lock and key to ensure his loyalty while finding pure pleasure in unlimited night. As she indulged, she discovered that these experiences helped her relieve the stress of her new responsibilities. The more stress she felt, the more time she spent finding relief in wild night games, which emotionally stimulated her. Each experience brought her peace of mind and allowed her to sleep peacefully, though she didn't realize she was exhausting herself. Despite everything, she was able to maintain the appearance of a devoted wife and mother, returning home from her business trips without anyone suspecting what was going on. She also enjoyed the added benefit of being herself without demanding extraordinary results from her performance. Only recently did I discover the real reason for the breakup between Jesse and Janice, and who Jesse's mistress was behind his wife's back. His affair with this woman began almost 4 years ago when he was persuaded to join her family's organization. My wife and Jesse had remarkably similar careers within their family conglomerates, and it wasn't unusual for them to encounter each other at corporate events. During breaks, they developed a relationship based on trust, which was further supported by the fact that she had already held some of the positions Jesse aspired to. Both being involved in global conglomerates, they often traveled in the same circles. Jesse was convinced by his father and brothers to join her organization as their families began the long process of merging their companies. They were just weeks away from announcing a merger that would have meant billions in additional net worth for both families. As a result, their relationship deepened once Jesse felt comfortable in his new work situation. After a few weeks, Adura realized that he was pliable enough to follow her into the hidden world she was exploring. A competitive athlete throughout his college years, Jesse was still in great physical shape and attractive. He was naturally tall and slender, which made him appealing to many women. How Janice managed to get him to commit to marriage remained a mystery to all of us, as Jesse was constantly being pursued. Adura's company maintained several private penthouses around the world for management to use when needed, no questions asked. It was like a gift from fate, one that served her well. Adura turned one of these penthouses in Paris into her temporary home away from home, due to her frequent travel. Since matters of sensuality were more openly accepted in this society, Adura used this freedom to further explore the bolder side of her emerging dominant persona. She didn't view her behavior as excessive, though in some ways it had started to consume her. Over time, I learned that she employed some of the techniques she had mastered to influence those who opposed her plans, finding their weaknesses and subtly swaying them to her point of view. After 6 months, Adura began regularly sharing her space with Jesse. It was during this period that she started to subtly guide him, gently and lovingly drawing him into her world. Jesse adapted to Adura's new interests, believing it strengthened their connection, and no one around them noticed any changes since their professional relationship remained as public as ever. They were frequently seen together, working on the merger that kept them both away every couple of weeks. No one realized how deep their emotional and physical bond had become during this time. Together, they secured majority stakes in two major suppliers, ensuring controlled costs and sustainable growth. I remained unaware of the extent of their connection until recently. Janice, however, noticed subtle changes in Jesse's appearance and lifestyle after their frequent trips. Upon returning home one day, she discovered he had begun using high-end grooming products, and his announcement that he planned to have all his body hair removed to improve his swimming performance left her puzzled. Then, an envelope marked private and confidential arrived at my office, though it had been misplaced for over a month. Inside were revealing photographs. Some images showed Adura in compromising positions, while a masked man and woman, later identified as Jesse and another woman named Jasmine, were also involved. Whoever sent the photos clearly wanted to expose the nature of this relationship, suggesting that it had been ongoing for some time. I combined the photos to create a wide image showing Jesse with two women, and beneath it, someone had written, "This is how we reward those who conform to our expectations." It reminded me of the early days when my wife, her best friend Tara, and I were getting to know each other. We often discussed why some women chose their partners based on their willingness to embrace a more traditionally feminine role. It was a topic that came up frequently in their dorm, and as someone a bit naive, it was eye-opening for me. Even with the mask, I recognized her. The woman guiding Jesse was my wife, Adura. This new dynamic was a part of her evolving fantasy, which I struggled to comprehend. As I gathered the photos to return them to the envelope, I discovered a small blue flash drive inside. After connecting it to the computer, I realized it contained recordings of their activities, from start to finish. The sounds of their laughter and conversation filled the room, indicating they enjoyed their time together. Jesse even selected his attire and how he would present himself before each session. I decided to send the envelope and all the photos to the shredder, locking the flash drive in the office safe. Their own words confirmed that this relationship had been ongoing for some time, revealing that our marriage had become little more than a facade. It also explained why Adura frequently found excuses to be away from home for long periods. After processing all of this, I reached out to Tara, who is a well-known divorce lawyer for the affluent. Over the next few days, my family felt like I was walking on eggshells. I did my best to keep my knowledge hidden. My children noticed my silence at home but eventually stopped questioning my behavior, especially when I began issuing instructions to the house staff. The party was winding down, a massive success. The band hired by my wife's parents had just taken a break before their final set. My beloved wife, and I have always been complete opposites in our thoughts, beliefs, and lifestyle. Many who knew us throughout our lives thought that nothing would work out for us. I met her in the summer when I was hitchhiking around Europe before modern restrictions began. I encountered her near a Hungarian church, which I photographed because of its architectural value. It was so old that it had some traditional Christian symbols, long lost, hand-carved into the stone. For example, the name of God was carved in the native language above the church doors. Today's society would have no idea what these letters meant because even in the Bible, the tradition of not using his name has been taken to extremes. Modern versions have deliberately removed all traces of this name. The elites began to erase the name of God from the memory of humanity. She was there on holiday with her best friend, who was also present at the party. They were both free spirits then, and, to some extent, still are. Both were prone to thoughts more typical of the substance culture and hippies of the 70s. They were virgins when I met them, and neither was I. They both had beautiful figures, which made them quite attractive, and they dressed a little too revealingly for my taste. Or constantly showed off her intimacy with her large chest partially exposed and bouncing freely. I found it a little off-putting. To me, she looked like a cheap, low-class, easily accessible woman and not a lady from a wealthy family. On the other hand, I grew up in a family that was not blessed with wealth. Everything I have achieved in life I have earned myself or borrowed through student loans to get my education. This taught me to be more reserved and quiet in everything I did. I didn't try to be the center of attention like they always did. I counted every penny, then just as I do now. My wife thought that I still had the first nickel I earned. Even today, I am considered a private person, even though the business I built from scratch is now worth millions. My architecture firm now has 7 offices across the country and is considered one of the most prestigious firms on the North American continent. At least twice a year, one of the buildings we designed is featured in one of the monthly magazines in the field. However, little is known about my personal life because I quickly realized that I achieved more when I kept my name and identity in the shadows. I let our projects speak for themselves. Or learned that I didn't talk much about myself when she accidentally knocked me over while I was on my knees trying to get an angled shot of the church they had come to check out. While I tried to apologize, Tara helped me collect the lenses that had fallen out of the bag I had placed next to me. That was one of the things I found attractive about her. When our eyes met, mutual interest arose. We even checked for damage before we introduced ourselves to each other. At the end of the day, we had lunch together in one of the street cafes in Budapest and learned that all three of us studied at different universities in New York. Returning to school, I found Tara. We went on dates for a while until we found out about it. Or took this as a personal challenge because, in her eyes, her friend had surpassed her, and this could not be ignored. Thus began our long relationship. It was only a year after the wedding, when Or was pregnant, that I realized she had been manipulating us all from the very beginning to gain an advantage. I now understood that Or had intentionally gotten pregnant and was the first to inform me to make a commitment and marry her because of my strong sense of duty. Now Tara and I are pretty sure that Or and I weren't sleeping together when Debbie was conceived. We produced 3 children, and until the last 4 years, it was a perfect marriage. Everything was going great until she received her last promotion, which she accepted because our kids were getting older. We were now like 2 ships passing in the night, and her nightlife reflected this change, allowing her to develop new tastes and attitudes more amenable to the new lifestyle she had created for herself as a world traveler. I am now forever grateful to my father-in-law for the prenuptial agreement he made me sign. He will forever leave me in the driver's seat moving forward. I was angry at myself for keeping faithfulness to marriage vows when Or did not. Our 3 children, 2 girls and a boy, took the microphone during the band's break to express their warm greetings and congratulations on my birthday. I also said a few words to thank my children and my wife's parents for organizing the surprise for Or. I congratulated my wife on achieving another milestone in her life. My wife took the microphone, already slightly tipsy. I want to thank Mom, Dad, Debbie, Dina, and David for giving me this surprise. I wonder how you managed to overcome my husband's objections because he is, and always has been, like that. Raymond is so mentally old that he is simply a relic because he refuses to keep up with what is considered normal in our ever-changing society. These were the first words addressed to me all evening. Knowing that the situation was quickly going downhill, I tuned it out. At that moment, I fully realized how little Or cared about me or us as a married couple. I was the only one who needed to look after the children while she was an active member of the intimately liberated club. The love she once felt for me as her life partner was now long gone because of her new lifestyle. There was no love, no desire, no will left in her for me. Her utter contempt for who and what I am was expressed loud and clear to everyone present, even my children, who were usually blind to everything but what was in front of them. Debbie, our eldest, came up to me and took my hand in hers. As we looked at each other, I noticed tears in her eyes. I knew that Debbie realized she was watching the breakdown of her parents' marriage right before her eyes. I haven't changed, but Or's views on who and what I am have changed radically over the past 4 years. I knew this change was due to who and what she now regularly associated herself with and their outlook on life in general. As my wife continued to talk, I used my cell phone to call our staff and make sure all of her personal items were packed and ready to go as soon as they were told where to send them. Surprisingly, I found myself in a state of complete peace because I saw in what was about to happen a release from a burden that I had carried for too long. The very aspects of my personality that had attracted Or to me in the first place were now the very things she hated. That little impromptu speech she gave made me see where my flaws were in her eyes. Believe me, I knew there were many of them. You see, I'm proud of who I am and what I stand for. I take pride in my moral values and the fact that truth and honesty still mean something to me. I believe in responsibility and that the words a person says still carry weight. I pride myself on believing that there is no harm to all of humanity, even those whom I consider my enemies. All my building design awards have been won for how environmentally friendly the buildings were. Each one has been designed to leave as little of a carbon footprint as possible. Based on my reputation, I was a leader in this field. My beliefs allow me to stand up for what I believe in and defend it at all costs. I still believe in fair pay for fair work and that everyone should pay their own way. I believe that if you make your bed, then you and only you must deal with the circumstances you create. I still believe in our Father and His Son, Jesus Christ, whom many now consider a figment of the imagination of an uneducated man, which the elite picked up and used to create a fictional book as a way to socially engineer the masses. After all, you would have to be a complete idiot to believe and adhere to the false doctrines and morals taught by the Bible. I still believe that it is what is inside me that makes me the person I am, not the shell of my body by which many judge me. I am proud to call all people, no matter their race or color, my brothers and sisters because we all have the same Father. Unfortunately, for most educated people, the Bible cannot be true because we are descended from the dust and slime of the earth, and as humans, most of them have the morals to prove it. That's why there's nothing morally wrong or right in their eyes. At the end of the day, they are just acting like animals and following their basic instincts. I'm still grateful that I don't hate those who judge me because, in their eyes, I don't have the right perspective. I think they are like my wife, who sees that my morals, principles, faith, and standards in general mean nothing in our society. After all, if you can teach them to act, perform, and satisfy your particular intimate tastes when they are young, it will guarantee you some very enjoyable and self-serving, very erotic moments. To me, the only thing that matters to most is what's in it for them. Many animals in the animal kingdom have no problem killing their young. Most of society has found a legal way to bring the same right into human society, although everyone believes that life should be protected. Even those who claim to have some kind of intelligence superior to the animal world prove by their constant behavior that they do not possess it. All this time, Tina was next to me. Tara was glad we accepted someone else. I think I better go get my paperwork and get ready for the show, Tara said with a smile. Tina, do you want to come? People are starting to wonder what's going on. Tina leaned over, kissed me on the cheek, and said, "Thank you, Dad, for making this an evening I will never forget." Janice Yellen came up to me and said, "Raymond, you're handling Orr's comments very well. I would be angry if Jess said any of the things she said about me before we got married." Orr's father made Janice sign a prenuptial agreement. I explained, Tara, Orr's best friend, will, at my request, take the microphone to tell everyone who Orr's longtime lover is. "Did you know?" Janice asked. "I suspected, but I didn't know who," I answered. "Evidence was provided to me earlier this week from someone I don't even know." When Tara saw the evidence that was presented to me, she volunteered to become my lawyer, facing the situation in a cruel manner. Since this was already planned, we felt this was the perfect location to confront them both. Janice looked at me in a way that made me think I should explain further, so I added that Tara and I now believe Adura has been manipulating the two of us since we first met during our university days. As a result, a lot of truth has emerged, and Tara, her daughter Tina, and I are looking forward to life without Adura's influence. Tara and I looked through our entire history and discovered that I had slept with her when Debbie was conceived. I'll never forget the look on Janice's face when I realized what I had said, and then she said, "Brilliant." Tara is known as the best divorce lawyer in certain circles and is the one handling Jesse's and my divorce. You came tonight expecting Adura to do what she does, give her one last hurrah before she falls. Everyone here will feel like you set them up to turn them into Adura's fools. It was during this period that I learned Tara never got married because she was still carrying a torch for me. It seems we both realized too late what Adura was doing to all of us. For both of us, this was the moment we had been waiting for because her behavior freed us from the bonds we had created. Past and present will hit Adura hard tonight. After leaving the office, Tara and I took a long, leisurely walk through a nearby state park. We discussed all the major events that the three of us shared, seeing it all from different perspectives. It was then that I learned about her true feelings for me. After discussing the pros and cons of starting a new relationship with each other, we decided to take a chance and see if it could develop into something further in the future. We were still walking when a couple with children asked us to photograph them with a panoramic view of the Appalachian Mountains in the background. We agreed, and I took several pictures. The last one was of a father and his two sons. My wife asked us if we had children. Tara replied, "We have 4, 3 girls and a boy, and we are deciding whether we want to raise another couple." "My parents do this," the husband said. They feel they are better at parenting now that they have more time. At this point, we started discussing whether we wanted to have children if we were together. We were both surprised that the other was open to the idea. That's when I got the shock that would change my life forever when Tara said, "Besides, it's time for Tina to meet the person who helped conceive her, if that's okay." I stood in shock, unable to speak, realizing what I had heard. If my memory serves me right, it was when Adura told Tara that we slept together. It wasn't true, but it caused our breakup. "Why didn't you tell me then?" I asked Tara, looking her straight in the eyes. She was my best friend and had never lied to me until that moment. Tara replied, "I had no reason not to believe her until this morning. What we watched together made me reconsider everything. I realized that there were many things she misled us about." At this point, we found a bench and began a long conversation about our shared history with Adura, from the journey where we first met until today. As we said goodbye, we shared our first emotional kiss since I got engaged to Adura. It left us with a taste of what was to come and a new understanding of what lay ahead. It was interesting to discover who we were without Adura's presence in our lives. "He's here," Janice said, looking around to see if she could tell from the faces who Adura's lover was. I told Jesse I believe he's involved with another woman, and when I find out who she is, I'm going to kill him. I already bought the gun I'm going to use. I watched Tara approach Adura and was grateful that she never got married. I always thought she would make some happy man's life complete. For a woman prone to wildness, Tara always did everything in moderation. It didn't take me long to realize that Tara had always been drawn into Adura's wild affairs against her will. I didn't notice that Janice noticed the exchange of glances between Tara and me. To her, it spoke volumes, although to us, it might have just been an act of friendship. Everything Tara did seemed to be the result of an innocence caught in a situation that had gone too far. Adura, on the other hand, clearly acted out of curiosity and an attempt to get by with minimal consequences. Tara reached Adura, and I watched with Debbie as she asked her for a microphone. The look of confusion on Adura's face at Tara's excitement made me smile. I noticed Tina watching me closely as she stood with the rest of my children. David and Tina were deep in serious conversation. Debbie just came up to me. Adura's mother, whom I loved, was in a bad mood, clearly upset by her daughter's behavior. "Debbie, maybe you should go see your sister and brother and be close to them because something big is about to happen, if I'm thinking correctly." Debbie replied, "Tara is your divorce lawyer, and Mom is about to get a subpoena." I nodded and said quietly, "And her long-term lover too. It's time to end the facade of our marriage. We all thought she was having an affair." My daughter replied that with her busy work schedule, she is never home. This created the perfect storm for her. My siblings and I are not impressed with this new version of our mom. It seems like the virus has been a mixed blessing for her because it has allowed her to keep up appearances while having an acceptable excuse. "Let your siblings know that I will explain everything when we get home," I said before Debbie headed off to her grandparents and siblings. When Tara introduced herself to everyone present, I walked to the center of the room. I wanted to look into the faces of my wife and her lover as they were served. That's when everyone realized that something else was going on. When Tara asked Jessie Ellen to join them, I smiled a smug smile. Janice looked at me and silently asked, "Is Jessie her lover?" I nodded affirmatively. I knew I had to keep an eye on her because Janice's face turned white once Jessie joined them. It took Tara less than a minute to hand Adura the papers. "Congratulations, Adura, you are getting divorce papers based on spousal neglect and adultery," Tara said. "It also means that our long friendship has come to an end." Turning to Jessie, Tara added, "You're being sued for interfering with Adura's marriage. When Raymond showed me his evidence, we both realized that you have been playing with our lives since our university days. It's time to pay for this game with the last move." Both were stunned. I don't think any of them believed they would get caught. As I looked around the room, I noticed expressions on many people's faces. Some were clearly in shock. Everyone seemed to quickly change their mind about me. Adura's face turned white. I laughed until I saw Janice open her bag as if she was going to get something. Her face expressed pure rage. I quickly ran to stand in front of her. I was pretty sure I knew what she was going to do. She was just trying to reach for a small revolver when I grabbed her wrist and pulled her hand away. "Let me go," Janice said in a loud and very upset voice. "I have to do this." I pulled her face close to mine and whispered in her ear, "Grow up. They are not worth you losing your freedom because of the pain, anger, and rage you feel. Believe me, Janice, I thought about killing them both myself." That's when her tears started flowing. I pulled Janice toward me, hugging her tightly, partly to make sure she had no way of getting to her gun. Looking around the room, I realized we had become the center of attention. My wife's parents and our 3 children were still in shock but realized that I had stopped Janice from doing something foolish. I began to slowly lead Janice toward the exit, knowing that I needed to get her away from what was happening. I wasn't going to let her go until we left the conference room. Janice was extraordinarily beautiful in her own way. Her soft complexion allowed her to get by with less makeup than most. For me, this made her even more beautiful and desirable. Her naturally red curly hair gave the impression of tenderness and love in her features. With a figure that included 34 double C breasts, a 26-inch waist, and 36-inch hips, it was clear she wasn't one to say thank you and leave, but rather a keeper. She had a figure in which a good man could get lost for years. I realized that for both of us, our emotions and sensitivity were at the highest level. Until we got them under control, it was best to say as little as possible. As we slowly walked past Adura's parents, I said, "Mom, Dad, can you make sure the kids get home? I'll be back as soon as I've calmed Janice down and settled her. Then I will answer all your questions to the best of my ability." "Fair enough," Adura's mother said. "Raymond, just know that from what has been revealed, we don't blame you, but we do have a lot of questions." Adura's father, looking at me silently, asked, "What was in the bag?" I answered him in the same way, "A gun." The expression that appeared on his face said it all. Luckily, I managed to take her out of the room without anyone noticing my condition. We had just walked out of the rented room into the hallway when we separated so I could close the doors. Janice, still a little emotional, said, "Thank you for stopping me from digging myself a hole that I couldn't get out of." With these words, she leaned toward me and kissed me tenderly on the cheek, adding, "This is to confirm that I am still a woman whom an honest man finds attractive." We walked down the corridor to the main entrance. I gave the parking attendant my ticket, and he quickly went to get my car. "I came by taxi," Janice said. "Can you take me home?" "With pleasure," I replied, "but we need to make a few stops if that doesn't conflict with your plans." This suited her. The first stop was at the office, where I left the flash drive. I made 2 copies before returning the original to the safe. I did this so Janice would have her own proof to use against Jesse in the divorce. When I handed it over, I explained that it contained a lot of information but would be enough for her to deprive Jesse of everything. Then we headed to the police station. As we pulled up, Janice said, "You want me to come in and turn in my gun, don't you?" "For a while, I think it's better that you don't have that temptation before your eyes," I said. "An ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure." I watched her enter the station in the long, body-hugging white dress she had arrived in. I felt sad that life doesn't always allow us to appreciate what we have. Janice's backside had the kind of figure that many men would die for. I only hoped that, in time, she would find the right man for the right reason. It took her about 15 minutes before she returned to my car. Once she was settled and closed the door, she moved to sit right next to me, bringing back memories of my youth. "I hope no one who wasn't there tonight sees us," I said, "because it will give them the wrong impression." "Why do you always find the right words?" Janice asked with a smile. "When it's necessary," I replied as I started the car and drove off. Janice snuggled as close to me as possible, and I must admit I was flattered by her attention. I explained everything to the female officer before handing her the revolver. Janice said she congratulated me for being proactive and mentioned that they would give me a month to think about it before sending it to be destroyed. She noted that what I did required a lot of love and respect for myself as a person. I had to admit she was right. We reached her estate in 45 minutes, with Janice keeping her head on my shoulder the whole way. We hardly spoke, lost in our thoughts. As we drove past my house, I noticed that no one had returned yet. After parking, I escorted Janice to her door to make sure she could enter. "Ray, could you come in for a minute?" Janice asked as soon as the door closed behind us. Janice surprised me by turning to face me without saying a word. She aggressively attacked me with many deep, long, and tender kisses, each one stronger and more demanding than the previous one. We got so carried away that it had been a long time since a woman had been so aggressive with me. I knew that if I didn't leave, I would get lost. I saw the burning fire of desire in her eyes. Janice looked me straight in the eyes and said, "I know that you love me as much as I love you and that we are not in love with each other. If you think you can take advantage of me because I'm in an emotionally weak state, get it out of your head right now." We fell asleep feeling completely at peace with our without anything bodies entwined with each other. I woke up to find Janice cuddled up next to me, looking at me with a smile and a look of peace. When I got up to use the bathroom, she crawled under the sheets and waited for me to return. Within seconds, we were lost in each other's embrace again. Every moment was pure joy and excitement. Although she was much younger than me, this didn't bother her. The entire time we were together, we were inches apart. She raised her head to me, and we exchanged several tender kisses. "It's nice to just relax and be together," she said. "Ree, you showed me what it means to make love to someone who truly loves and accepts you for who you are, with a true emotional connection and a natural desire to put the needs of another first. You showed me what true love is. Thanks to you, I will never accept less." We spent quite a bit of time just cuddling, enjoying the moment as if we had no rush in the world. We got dressed and were drinking our first cup of coffee when Janice's phone rang. It was hard to believe that it was almost 1 o'clock in the afternoon. Her mother's driver, who was standing at the gate, called to say she flew in to be with her daughter because she heard the news. Opening the gates of the estate, Janice said, "Mom's visit is perfect. You can tell everyone that I was so upset that you stayed with me until we found someone who could give me the moral support I needed to move on. I think I should finish my coffee and leave." "I'll be here if you need anything," I said. "Plan on me needing your special reassurance at least until the divorce is over," Janice said with a laugh, "or until you and Tara decide where your common interests lie, whichever is longer." I just put my empty coffee cup in the sink. I turned to Janice, who was standing next to me, took her into my arms, and kissed her the same way it all began. Janice responded just as she had the night before. We both understood that if her mother hadn't come, we would have ended up in bed again. We realized we couldn't get enough of each other. After we stopped, Janice said with a smile from ear to ear, "That's exactly the answer I like, Ree. Call me later so I can let you know what's going on." She walked me to the door just as her mother arrived. Janice quickly explained who I was and why I was still in my suit. Having finished with that, I headed to my house next door, knowing what I would have to face. I needed to hide my feelings. I couldn't remember a time when I was so drawn to one woman. Janice and our connection made the struggles of the past 4 years worthwhile. I had just left her bed a few hours ago, and I already wanted to be with her again. When I got home, the first thing I noticed was that Janice had called to let them know I was on my way because her mother was there to give her the moral support she needed. Deanna's parents, Elizabeth and Richard Drury, had stayed overnight. Once I got through the greeting, I handed Richard the flash drive and asked him to view it privately in my office. We all gathered together in the living room. I explained what Janice was going to do and said that after she calmed down a little, we would take the small revolver to the police station. When Richard returned, he handed me the flash drive, which I put in my trouser pocket. Mom, Dad, children, from what I gathered, Deanna's affair with Jesse began about 6 months after his family asked him to join the company to help find ways to make the merger between the two conglomerates smoother, I said. Records will show that even during the quarantine, they lived together, although they officially had separate residences. My mother-in-law and children seemed to accept my explanation of what was happening until my father-in-law opened his mouth. Ree is trying to protect you, Richard said. Their behavior is worse than you can imagine. I think I can honestly say that if I had known what Ree knew before last night, he wouldn't have been able to stop me. Elizabeth looked at her husband as if studying his face, and after a couple of seconds, she said, "You are serious?" "Yes, I'm serious," Richard replied. Her behavior brought not only shame and disgrace to our family but also to the conglomerate itself. The woman I saw in the video is not the daughter we raised. I apologized, explaining that I needed to shave and change clothes. Deanna walked with me to my bedroom. "We all talked last night," Dean said. We were all worried about you and what you were going through. How are you, your sister, and brother coping with this? I think we all realized that knowing is better than not knowing, Deanna responded, because many questions were answered after a heated discussion. We all agreed that Mom left not only you but also all of us. I stopped, took my daughter in my arms, and said, I have long suspected that something was going on, and only this week I received proof. Deanna, this still hurts and will continue to hurt for a while until we find a way to deal with the consequences. With these words, the pain, tears, and emotions she had been holding back broke out. It's in moments like these that we realize the damage done when someone's behavior destroys a family. I held my middle daughter until she calmed down. I was the one who answered the phone when Aunt Janice called. Dean explained we talked a little. She told me what the cop said when she turned in the gun. My grandparents said you risked yourself to protect our mother. After what she did, what I did was nothing special, I said. Any good friend would stop their friend from doing something stupid, from losing control like I did. Maybe, but in Janice's eyes, you're walking on water now, Deanna said. And maybe you always will be. I smiled and thought about our love before continuing the conversation. What news about your mother? I asked. Jessie and her left right after you, Deanna explained. Grandpa found out from the limousine driver that they returned to the airport and took the first flight. Why? I asked. Grandma told everyone that you stopped Janice from taking out the gun, Deanna responded. Many people came up to us and asked us to convey their apologies for their behavior towards you. I smiled and explained, no one was supposed to know about this. Your grandmother shouldn't have disclosed this, but it's true. Deanna said, yes, but in the grand scheme of things, it doesn't matter. I said, it rarely has. It was most likely exaggerated by rumors into something that never happened. This is how the tabloids we see in stores make so much money. They twist the truth into something else, and most readers believe it, just like Mom did to all of us, right, Dad? Deanna asked sadly, what's even sadder is that her behavior shows that, in her eyes, neither of us were worth being told the truth. I replied, and in society, her behavior did not seem wrong. When Grandpa said you protected us all, Deanna asked, was he telling the truth? You're too young to know all the details, I said. But what your mother did to Jessie would make 50 Shades of Grey seem bland. Grandma doesn't even want to talk about that movie or watch it, Dean said. According to her, it is humiliating, demoralizing, and nothing but dirty intim. The difference in views on this film depends on personal moral values, I said. Some people believe in them and live with them, others don't. Anything else I need to know? I added, Tara and then Tina called, wanting to see if we'd heard from you, Dean said. Both expressed concern. Do me a favor and call one of them so they know I'm okay, I said, and let them know that I will call them this evening. Tina asked a lot of questions about you, first to David last night and to Debbie when she called earlier, Dean said. So much so that it started to interest us all. I think I know why, and I promise you will get the answers to explain everything, I said. When everything calms down. Everything has been calm since I got home on Saturday. I was grateful for this because it gave my children and me time to adjust. Janice and I contacted each other several times, and she made me promise that I would come see her as soon as her mother left. Tina and I had arranged a private lunch for Friday since it was only half a day of school, and I was looking forward to it. I couldn't help but wonder how our lives would have turned out if they hadn't intervened. Loving Janice will remain one of my favorite memories for a long time. In a way, she restored a part of me that I thought I had lost, my faith in myself. I took the first 2 days of work to make sure I would be there for those who needed me at home. Each of my children needed some personal time, and I was grateful that I was wise enough to help them understand their emotions. I called a general staff meeting this morning to catch up, and it just ended. Ray, Isabel Rosing is here and would like to talk to you if you are free, my secretary said, looking through the door. Give me a minute to tidy up my desk, and then invite her, I replied. I wondered who she was because I had never heard that name before. When I heard footsteps down the corridor, I stood up. As soon as the lady walked in, I recognized her as Janice's mother. If you look at Janice and her mother, it immediately becomes clear that they are related. Although their hair color was different, their facial features indicated kinship, and their physique, appearance, and mannerisms left no doubt about it. Both women were desirable in their own way. "It's good to see you again," I said, holding out my hand to her. She took it and said, "Thank you for taking the time to meet and for what you did for my only daughter. I'm on my way to the airport to board a private jet and wanted to talk to you before I leave." "How is Janice?" I asked with interest. "I haven't spoken to her since late Sunday," she replied. "She has come to terms with what is happening and is adapting." "She was in better condition than I expected when I arrived," Isabel said, "mostly thanks to you, because you helped her realize that she didn't fail and wasn't to blame for what happened." "Thank you for your kind words," I said. "How can I help you today?" "First of all, Janice and I reviewed the file you provided. To be honest, we were both shocked, appalled, and upset by what it showed. This will be useful to her in the divorce." Janice wondered if she was too blind to see what Jesse really wanted and if he married her because he needed a shield. This led to a long conversation between my daughter and me. We discussed everything from her future life to her relationship with you, and it brought us closer than any time since she was a teenager. My face must have given away my reaction because she said, "Relax, Mr. Wright. We're adults. Let me explain something. I have 3 children, 2 sons and an only daughter, all have the same father, whom I never married. Our relationship started as friends with benefits, and their father and I are still in a loving relationship that works for us. He's also about 10 years older than me." The conversation was getting interesting, and I thought it would be long, so I asked the secretary to bring coffee. "Our family is originally from Sweden, but now, like most families, we are scattered all over the world," Isabel explained. "Due to the failure of my first marriage and the state of our family, I decided it was better to never marry again." "That's understandable," I replied, "especially when you're dealing with something like what your daughter and I are dealing with. We live individual lives that are layered and complex." "But aren't all relationships like that in their own way?" asked Isabel. "I won't argue," I said. "I have always believed that what happens behind closed doors is no one's business except those who live behind those doors." My words seemed to please Janice's mother because I noticed from her gestures that she began to relax and feel comfortable with me. "To properly thank you, the family has decided to conduct a background check on you. Let me say that they were extremely impressed with the reports they received, both professionally and personally. You have an impeccable reputation," Isabel explained proudly. "Expect a call next week asking your firm to submit a proposal to design a new museum for the city of Stockholm, which we are sponsoring." "Thank you for the honor, and please call me Ree," I said as the secretary brought out a tray of coffee. "I'm sure when I get the request, there will be general details about what it will be used for." As soon as we were served and the secretary closed the door behind her, the conversation became even more interesting. The other woman in the video is a distant third cousin who Janice has never met. I was able to identify Jasmine by her voice. "I want to make it clear that she will be punished by the family once they view the file I sent them," Isabel said. "This will be done so that she will never become a problem for my daughter or you in the future." After a pause, Isabel continued, "Even among those considered the elite, there is a certain order. There are things that are not considered acceptable when they become public knowledge, so there are quite harsh ways of dealing with those who are considered undesirable." "Thanks, that's good to know," I said. To be honest, I didn't think about Jasmine other than as another advantage in the custody battle. Isabel smiled, as she seemed to understand that my main concern was the needs of my children. "Janice has found herself, and I think it's mostly because of your long-term developing relationship with her," Isabel said. "Honestly, I'm extremely proud of how she's coping. Her confidence has come to the fore, and it shows. She is a very nice woman for whom I feel affection, and my 3 children love her too," I said. "Janice knows that she is a close friend to me and my children, so much so that my kids call her auntie. I understand that very well, and I know what happened before I arrived, including the status of your relationship," Isabel said, "even to the point where you helped her cope with the shock when her breasts began to lactate due to overload." I blushed. Isabel smiled and said, "Janice said you are a modest person. I see that she is right. This only confirms how well you know each other. Thus, I give my approval to any relationship that you and my daughter decide to develop." "Thanks, that means a lot," I replied. If things work out as I hope, Isabel said with a smile, I look forward to her visit with a full set of nannies and the few little children you conceived following at her heels. I laughed because this woman could be brutally honest, and it was refreshing. I realized that I was starting to like her, so I said, would you like to have lunch with me at the club? The pilot is used to waiting for me, so I have all the time in the world. Isabel said an hour or two wouldn't add much to the cost. I quickly called the club's restaurant to make a reservation, and we headed there while Isabel instructed the limousine driver. I called Janice and invited her to join us. Janice was waiting for us when we arrived. Mother, Janice said with a slight reproach, I asked you not to interfere. Isabel laughed and smiled before saying, I was just stopping by to let Ree know that he will be given the opportunity to take his firm international. Of course, Janice replied. If I asked Ray if you guys talked about kids, what will he say? Not a word, I replied, because I'm not going to get involved in this. Both Janice and Isabel laughed. Mom, I told you what he's like, Janice said with a smile. He's very careful with what he says. Most thinking men are like that, said Isabel. When everything goes to hell, these are the men who will remain standing. You will always know where you stand with him because, whether you like it or not, he will be direct and honest. With that, we headed into the club. After Janice and I exchanged a few soft kisses under the watchful gaze of her mother, Isabel was delighted with our public displays of affection toward each other. Lunch surprisingly was a success. Isabel loved the quality of the food and the atmosphere of the restaurant. Janice was pleased that her mother and I had begun to build a relationship. Before leaving for security checks, after kissing us goodbye on the cheek, Isabel said, I hope to see you both when Reed does his inspections of the museum's construction. Janice, let me know in advance so I can arrange for your father to be present. We went back to the club to get Janice's car, and I followed her back to her house. As soon as we entered the house, Janice said, I sent you a program that will open and close the gate. Your house key is on the kitchen counter. Mom and I changed everything while she was here. All of Jess's personal belongings were placed in public storage. When we reached the kitchen, I attached the key to my ring. I started rinsing the coffee pot, and together we started it up while I sat at the end of the kitchen table. Janice warmed the coffee cups. As I turned the chair to the side, she came and sat beside me. Thanks to you, mister, Janice said after the kiss. My mother will call me every week to see if my baby bump has started to change shape. Is your father exclusively with your mother? I asked, thinking about what Tara and I had agreed on. My father is married, Janice explained. He was the older brother of my mother's first husband. Like my mother, his family is also old money. He is a member of the House of Bernat and part of the Swedish royal family. He appears to be 10th in line to the throne. That explains a lot, I said. I told your mother that what happens behind closed doors is no one's business except those who live behind those doors. Janice stood up and poured us coffee. After preparing it, she came back and sat on my lap. Mom and I did some research online about my breast lactation and learned that for some women it can start at the moment of conception, Janice explained with a big smile. You're not on contraceptives? I asked. Not since I broke up with Jesse, Janice replied with a laugh. She looked into my eyes, and I could see how happy she was by the possibility of us having a baby. I can't, Janice replied. What do you hope to gain if it is confirmed that you are pregnant? I asked. Mom wants a girl because both my brother's wives have boys, Janice replied. I don't care as long as I'm healthy. We'll have to decide what his last name will be before he's born. No, you won't have to because when I talked to my divorce lawyer, I found out that I can legally change my last name to anyone, she said. So I'll change my last name to yours. I smiled because I knew she wasn't interested in marriage, and I hadn't thought about it yet either. We both had a lot of issues that needed to be resolved. By the way, the reason Tara's daughter spent so much time with me on Friday night, I said, is because earlier that week, Tara admitted that I was her father. Janice digested the information for a few minutes before responding. If you didn't have evidence of Adir and Jesse's behavior, you would never have known. True, because it took Tara seeing that video to realize that Adura had been lying to her since university, I explained. This led to us spending a day going through everything to uncover all of her deceptions over the years. Now I understand why I saw that look between you, Janice said. Does this mean Tara wants to reconnect after all these years? I'm not sure yet, I replied, because the emotions are still too strong. Tara and I still have a friendship, but I don't know what it will be until everything calms down. Where does that leave us? Janice asked. Where we are, I said. Our relationship was formed because of what Adura and Jesse did to us. Our love, friendship, and trust for each other are strong and grow stronger every day. I think I said what I needed to say because Janice stood up from my lap and led us to what she called our bedroom. There, she showed me my new closet and chest of drawers for my clothes. Cable television is changing social values in America, Janice said. Promise me that you'll be open to what both Tara and I want because we both want our father in our lives. A month had passed since I was served with the papers, and the New York Times announced the successful merger in the morning paper. What stood out to me was that Adura and Jesse's names were not on the new management. When I called to congratulate my father-in-law, Richard told me that Adura and Jesse were still working for the conglomerate but had been assigned to manage one of the subsidiaries. This meant their careers and futures were over. At this time, it was confirmed that Janice was indeed carrying our first child. Tina and I became closer, and she was scheduled to become an intern working at a local office for the summer. Tara already knew that something was going on between me and Janice because Janice had asked her about changing her last name. Tara and I honestly tried to build a relationship, but we soon realized that we had too much emotional baggage. After spending many years with Adura, Tara wanted another child, so she underwent insemination using my sample, which made Janice very happy because our relationship became exclusive during this process. She met her future husband, the doctor who performed the insemination. According to state law, all 3 of my children were interviewed by social services. All 3 stayed with me during a family meeting. I told my parents, my father-in-law, and my children with Adura that Tina was my daughter. This led to me having to explain how it all happened. It was difficult for everyone to know that their exceptions had lasted so long. Richard and I walked around the estate. He wanted to know how the divorce was going and if there was anything he could do to speed up the process. That's when he learned there was a good chance my eldest daughter, Debbie, wasn't mine. It took 3 months for the divorces between Janice and me to be finalized. I think Richard's and Jesse's families intervened. We both found ourselves in an advantageous position as a result, so we put our houses up for sale. We both felt it was time for a new beginning. Fortunately, Janice's pregnancy was not yet noticeable because we were going to Stockholm. My father-in-law and mother-in-law looked after the children for a month while I oversaw the start of construction for the museum. My project was chosen because it suited the city and had a minimal carbon footprint. Richard promised to oversee the construction of our new home. Before I went on the trip, I talked to the kids and got their blessings. All 3 of them were excited about what I had planned. We arrived and were greeted by Isabel and her 2 sons. We were in Stockholm for about a week before we were able to walk down the love path of Crown Princess Victoria and Prince Daniel. This is a hiking trail on the west side of Uzet between the J.S. Brunn Canal and the pumping station on the south side of Uzet. While enjoying my afternoon, I got down on one knee and asked Janice to marry me. Janice didn't expect this, but fortunately, she didn't hesitate. I think it took her less than 10 seconds to scream yes. I admit it was a very emotional moment for her. As soon as I put the ring on her finger, she started showering me with kisses. At 7 p.m. local time, we called the children from my mobile phone in the presence of Janice's parents. We found the perfect way to break the news to them. Debbie put the phone on speaker so we could talk to all 3 kids at once. Your dad and I would like to see if Debbie and Deanna would be willing to honor us, Janice said, by agreeing to be my bridesmaids. Isabel and Swan were so stunned that Isabel began to cry. Of course, this led to 1,000 questions from everyone that we didn't have answers to, so we had to promise that we would provide all the details as soon as we decided on some issues. When things calmed down, Janice told Isabel that she was expecting the granddaughter she had always wanted. While we were in Stockholm, we learned that Adura Wright, Jasmine, and Jessie Ellen had gone missing at sea, and the authorities were looking for their plane. I remembered Isabel's promise. We learned that Adura survived, but she had to spend a month on a fishing boat. I don't know what happened, but she came back a broken person and retired to live quietly in the Florida Keys. In the fall, in the second half of September, Janice and I got married. Tina, Debbie, and Deanna were her bridesmaids. My son David and my 2 nephews, who were a little older than him, stood by my side. Isabel, Swan, and her entire family attended the wedding. Isabel held her 1-month-old granddaughter, YY, in her arms the entire time. The wedding took place on the lawn of our new estate. Adura was present, and I overheard Debbie and Deanna talking about their mother, who now had to use a cane regularly. Mom made decisions in her life thinking she could have it all, Dean said. She never thought that karma would have its say. True, but when you compare our parents, Debbie replied, karma gave them back what they deserved. What do you think of our story today? It seems to me that a woman's behavior is very important, because you can understand how a woman really feels. What's your opinion? Write in the comments. Until new videos.